Hey everybody, Bonehead from the Bonehead podcast, and welcome to Print to Pitch. This is where we have a look at everything 3D printed in Blood Bowl, from teams from Patreon, for ones you can buy on Colts, to star players, big guys, and stuff that has nothing to do with Blood Bowl, but really works anyway. We look at it all. So it is the beginning of the month. This is when the really good stuff hits. And we've got the first of the next teams from Punga for their Patreon. Now, the way Punga do this is they tend to split it up into 2 to 3 months. And the first bit of this team is a Goblin team. It's gone with a Night Goblin aesthetic. So naturally, we've printed them out to have a look at them. So we're going to have a look at what you get in the pack, the STLs themselves, and then look at the prints. Okay, so like I said, Punga split their teams up into 2 to 3 months, and this is a Goblin team. So a Goblin team, you're kind of looking for your secret weapons, and you're kind of looking for your trolls. The first month here, we've got, 10, 12 different Goblins? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Goblins. With, I think, some of the most important positionals kicking around. So you've got the Pogoer, you've got the Chainsaw, and you've got the Hooligan over there with the big banner. Now that does mean that immediately you are missing the ball and chain, you're missing the trolls, you're missing the doom diver, so it's not a complete team. It is such a cool looking team. I love the Night Goblin aesthetic, and you guys know that I'm absolutely dying for a Night Goblin team to come out. Well, Punga are very much on the way. So this is part 1 of what I'm hoping is going to be 2 parts, but might end up being 3 parts. We've got to talk about cost at this factor. Punga's Patreon is about 10 somethings a month, right? So it's like £10 a month or £8 a month or something like that. So over the course of 2 to 3 months, you're paying £25 for a team. Now, looking at some of the other excellent teams out there, for example, Brute Fun is probably my go-to. They have a very reasonably priced set of teams that are all around about £20-25 a team, which is definitely worth it when you think about the STLs. So even though you're paying over the course of months for a team like this, what you're getting is probably about right. Now, these models are all supported, they're all pre-supported, and I have great pleasure in telling you that after printing them out at various scales using the pre-supports, which I don't always recommend, they were great. They're a bit chunky, but they work beautifully. Anyway, you get the 3 different secret weapons and a bunch of different individual goblins. Let's have a look at the STLs. Okay, so I've picked a few of my favourite sculpts from this month's pack, and you've got the Pogoer, the Chainsaw, a random Goblin in a very catching pose, and the Hooligan. Now, the Hooligan is a bit of an underrated Goblin player. Not a secret weapon, but a genuinely useful positional. So I love this rendition of the Hooligan. I love the banner. That's going to actually allow you some pretty cool hobby. Like, you can paint your team colours, you can paint abusive messages on there, make them reasonably family friendly, guys, if you go into tournaments. You've got a bottle of grog, and let's face it, Punga are not known for doing bad sculpts. They're known for doing excellent sculpts. And actually, you know what you're seeing here is very good. It's just very good. There's a little bit less surface texture than I would like compared to some of the other ones. Now, we looked at the Torchlight team recently. There's a lot of actual surface texture, so that some of the metal's got, you know, actual like scratches. It's got kind of it's got a texture to it that's going to take contrast and dry brushing really well. These guys are missing a little bit of texture, so you can see that the metal plates here are all flat, which is, you know what, it's fine. It's not going to be the worst thing in the world, and a lot of resin printers aren't going to pick up too much anyway. But Hooligan, great pose, love that. The Chainsaw, though, is probably the star of this pack. It is such a cool design. The route they've gone here with is very much in line with the Gloomspite Gits from Age of Sigmar. Now, I say Gloomspite Gits, not just Night Goblins, as they always have been, because they've got the kind of helmets and the armor that really fits in with the new Gloomspite thing. So if you've picked up some Squig Hoppers and stuff like that, this is absolutely bang on. And as you can see, the Goblins have got a load of different poses. They've gone simple. You've got Night Goblins, you've got Night Goblin hoods, Night Goblin robes, you've got some cool flame bits on there, which is actually a really important part of Night Goblin like design. And they've done a superb thing here in adding some sports gear on. So this Night Goblin has a knee pad because he plays Blood Bowl. The new Games Workshop Amazon team, no knee pads, but they are playing Blood Bowl, so definitely something to mention. Now the faces are awesome. They do look like the old school Kev Adams Goblins, and it just... We're seeing a bit of a kind of retro comeback here. I'm blaming Stranger Things because everything is like 80s and 90s. These Goblins, super 90s, and I really enjoy it. And the the Pogo, who is bouncing around on a mushroom with a Pogo, like with a spring in there, is a really good design as well. I love the goggles. Completely unnecessary, but it works. Now, this is just straight up a great model design. There's plenty of detail without it being overwhelming, which is pretty nice. Now, I've got no big guy to show you. I've got no fanatic to show you. I guess we're going to have to wait till next month to get that. But the cool thing here is you get enough line goblins so that you can brew up the team. You've got the chainsaw, you've got the hooligan, you've got Mr. Pogo. Actually, if you needed a diver, this dude, you could stick some wings on, or a parachute, or anything, right? No problem at all. And in fact, you could probably convert one of these guys to be a fanatic, or you can just pick up one of the Games Workshop fanatics. There are loads of fanatics kicking out there if you want a single one to STL. The Brute Fun Savage Goblin with like the big chain with the big skull on. Excellent. It's like $3.50. That will have you right sorted. And when it comes to trolls, you have got an infinite amount of trolls. If you've been supporting Punga for a while, they've got trolls. They've got some river trolls from one of their previous teams. Or, I don't know, if you are 3D printing, there are a ton of great options. Or you go to your friendly local gaming shop, or if you don't have one, you go to entoyment.co.uk and you pick up a box of Rotgut Troggoths. Because one, it's going to fit the aesthetic perfectly, and two, for a single box, you get 3 of them. So actually, if you don't want to wait to get the trolls for this team, we don't know what they're going to look like, that's the best way to do it. Now, I know you guys aren't that fussed by looking at the STLs or the pre-supports, but I really did want to show it off because they are quite chunky supports. Like, this is not as bad as some of the earlier stuff that they did. The dwarf teams they did were just like, it was just a big old chunk. They've got really good contact points. So when you look at the pre-supported versions, you can think that is a ton of supports. And actually, if you look at the bottom, there is a load of stuff going on there. But the points where they hit the model are well distributed and they are quite thin. Now, it will take a little bit of work to peel off some of them. I do recommend hot water or a hot air gun or something, just something to warm up your prints. It will help it come off, but be very careful because you've got arms and fingers and things that are actually supported. So it takes a little bit longer than with some models if you're going to use the pre-supports. But the good thing about these sculpts is they're not too dynamic that you can't just use a light support, auto support for them if you're not too fussed, but can confirm pre-supports all work. But that's enough of the STLs. Let's have a look at the models themselves. So we've done the thing that we always do, which is we print a bunch of them at 100%. And they come out great. Like, okay, let's see if we can actually get this on the camera to zoom in. Maybe I didn't clean this up as well as I should have done, but I don't think it's too bad. Right, model comes out lovely. This is my Elegoo Mars 2 Pro, and standard settings, standard resin, a little bit higher than standard temperatures, I'm afraid to say. I actually had some slippage on a print earlier today, which is the first time in a while. This, actually first time ever, actually. Anyway, model, lovely. Scale is something we're going to talk about in a second, but you can see they actually, if this was metal, I would believe this to be original Games Workshop stuff. Okay, the design, the proportions, it's all very Games Workshop, and I am very much on board with that. So these are 100%, and let's bring in our trusty scale machine here, which is obviously none other than Grot Brady himself. 100% scale. Let's grab this dude here. Do you know what? It's fine. 100% is fine. Now, they are a little bit smaller than the Goblins from the Black Orc team, and the Goblins from the Black Orc team are, in fact, a little bit smaller than the standard Goblins. So if you want your team to size up with the Games Workshop ones, then 100% will be okay, but it will be a little bit on the small side. So 100% is all right. And actually, It prints fine. They look great. Then I took one and I printed it at 110%. And actually, that lines up really well. Let's see if I can put this in the middle of the screen. Lines up really well. The heads for the Punga models are a little bit probably more realistic than the Games Workshop ones. So 110% was fine. 110% is probably around about right. And because it's me and my first print, I wasn't sure how big they were going to be. I printed them at 120%. 120% is a little on the big side. Now, it depends on how you want your team to roll, doesn't it? If you want to print them out at 100%, then your team's going to be just fine, nice and easy. You don't have to do any resizing. And they will look like goblins. They're a little on the small side compared to the newer models, but actually it's fine. If you scale them up to 120%, I feel like I might have said 200%, that would be sweet, then actually they're going to be more in line with the 3rd edition Hobgoblins. Okay, so if you played against a Cursed Dwarf team recently, then this is probably a little bit smaller than Hobgoblin size. So I settled for somewhere in between, and what I did then is I did a second print and I printed everything off at 115%. That's right, we normally do 10s, but 110 just was a little small, 120 was a little big, and actually once I printed out 115%, it's got a bit of height on it compared to one of the Black Orc Goblins, and I was actually pretty happy with the overall size of it. In fact, if we've got a size 3 model kicking around, for example, a Nobility Thrower, we can line up this Goblin here. This is the 115%. Dude, he's smaller than the human, and that's where we want him to be. Actually, if you line him up base to base, I do love these models. I've got my Torchlight Goblin basically like all painted, base coated and everything. But then I'm looking at these goblins and I'm like, ooh, this is a cool goblin team. Actually, I like that this guy here is sneaking around with the ball behind his back. 115%, smaller than a human, but big enough that you get a reasonable impact from the model. So actually, 115% is the sweet spot for me. Now, I printed off a few of the different players. The benefit of 115% is I think it shows up a little bit better on camera, and you can see that actually they've got some cool poses. There's a couple of guys with the ball, and you've got that kind of goblin hood with the flames, which is going to be, you're going to be able to add a nice bit of color without doing independent flames. This one I love though, because in the old Warhammer Fantasy days there was a couple of goblin champions who had this hood with horns sticking out, and it just absolutely smacks of that that goblin champion, and I love it. It's a cool crouch position. This guy looks like a goblin superhero. Great detail on these. Like, I know that looking at the STLs, you don't see the areas are a bit flat, but actually once you're printed, this is going to be really good, and I'm actually very excited to paint up some of this team. Those are the boring goblins. These are the fun ones. So we've got the chainsaw. We'll do independent size comparisons here, but look at this absolute mad lad. So the chainsaw detail is brilliant. It is over the top. It is cartoony. It is very much a goblin secret weapon, which is superb. Now, detail-wise, there's a ton of stuff going on with this guy. He's got a big old chest plate on. He's got the hood. He's got the mad, like, grill around his face and the goggles. It's brilliant. There's a ton of stuff to paint on this guy. Whether you want to, you can add the detail. If you don't want to, then you don't have to fret. Now, size-wise, this one is 115%, and I think you'll agree that it is not too big compared to a human. In fact, this guy is probably sizing up about right. Now, the chainsaw feels right, and the hood feels good too. So actually really like this one, like this size. Some of the sculpts feel a little smaller than others, so these are printed at the same scale, but it's not going to be an issue because Goblins comes in all size and shapes. The only thing that kind of unifies them is the fact that they are absolutely mad. So, big fan of the chainsaw. Then we got the hooligan, which has come out, I think, brilliantly. Now, like I said at the top of the video, this one, it gives you a little bit of freedom when it comes to painting. You've got that banner, and you've got the bottle, and you've got some stuff. And because there's only one hooligan, And because he's not wearing the same robes as the rest of the team, actually you get license to be a little bit more creative when you paint him. So you can get some chest tattoos on the go, you get a bit more flesh, you can put some stuff on the banner on the back, and you can paint a bit of extra like words or labels or something on the bottle. And that's a really nice thing to add to a team where the design of the rest of it is actually really quite simple. Like, this is not going to take a huge amount of painting. And then you've got something special here, which is really cool. So big fan of the hooligan, and we'll do the size 3 comparison as well. Actually, he's smaller than a human, as he should be. This guy would make a great bit of fan coverage as well. So if you've got a stadium on the go, then having him or a couple of him in the stands would work brilliantly. And then last one we're going to look at today is the Pogoer, which I think I did a terrible job removing some of the supports there, didn't I? Let's get that off and pretend we never saw it. That looks much better, doesn't it? So yeah, loads of detail on the face. It's got a kind of Magic the Gathering element to it. The cartoony face, the goggles. It's like, this is very much one red flying, isn't it? Maybe just unblockable. But really cool. I mean, it's come out beautifully, and size-wise, I guess the thing that's most important, compared to a Black Orc Goblin, mass-wise, he looks okay. Like, it's clearly a strength 2 player, and it works brilliantly. And from a height point of view, actually, it lines up nicely with a strength 3 player. And if we compare it to another one of the Goblins that I printed at 115%, actually, he's clearly, I mean, it's the most obvious position other than a chainsaw, isn't it? So, like that. And the print came out great. There you have it, a very promising start for a Goblin team from Punga. Yes, I know it's a bit of a nuisance that you have to wait in stages, but I mean, as a kid, I grew up with the dinosaur magazines in the UK, and if you remember those, my poor parents, I think it was like one issue of a magazine a week. You got a bit of a dinosaur that had a wooden skeleton and then a plastic outside, and it was just amazing. It's just one of the most amazing things in the world. And I've decided to reframe the Punga like Patreon system as that. Like, oh, this edition, I get one half of the team. I'm going to print it off and paint it. And then the next one comes and I can finish my team over the course of 3 months. Because let's be very honest with ourselves. How often do you get a Blood Bowl team and paint it and have it all done? Only if there's a tournament coming up. And there are some other Goblins out there for 3D print that you can just go and do right now. But if you're in the market for a backup team, for some Goblins to add to your Orc team, then actually part 1 alone is great. I love the style. Size-wise, 115 for me. 100 to 110 is probably in line with other stuff. But I am pretty excited. I wonder if we'll see the Trolls next. But honestly, when it comes to big guys in Blood Bowl, there's so much out there that I don't even care. What I do want is a nice ball and chain to go with it. And then I just really want a Goblin Shaman. But I guess that's just me wish listing. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think about this team in the comments. And as ever, let me know how you feel about Punga's subscription service. I'm fine with it now. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back with more Blood Bowl content. Happy printing. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.